Welcome, everybody, to the at-large chapter of the American Constitution Society program, Afghan and Ukrainian refugees in the U.S., Lawyers to the Rescue. This program is being recorded. I'd like to introduce our speakers, but first I'd like to see who's signed in already besides us. Let me just see. So far, it's just us. Here we go, 2 attendees. Well, maybe we'll wait a minute or two because we have about 28 people who were planning to be here. Of course, we had a little glitch with the date, but I assume that more people will show up. So let me say hello to the 3 people who are attendees so far. We're just waiting a minute or two, and then we'll get started, and the latecomers could just jump in wherever they jump in. So we'll wait another minute or two till 5 after, I guess. And then we'll get the show on the road. Well, I'm tired of staring at the screen, so we'll get started and other people can just jump in. So as I said, this is the at-large chapter of the American Constitution Society. I'm the vice president, and we're happy to have a program today on Afghan and Ukrainian refugees in the U.S. and how lawyers to the rescue, how lawyers can help. So we have 2 very knowledgeable speakers. We have Florence Otakabi Nikwocha. Was I close, Florence? And she's an immigration attorney at Church World Service, providing services to asylum seekers and refugees. And she is very concerned about social justice, as basically anybody should be who's concerned with this topic, even if you're a person or a lawyer who doesn't ordinarily get involved with this type of situation. It's kind of an emergency to the extent that so many people are here or coming here that it should be all hands on deck. So Florence has been concerned with the Afghan situation on behalf of her organization. We also have Brandon Dollinger. He's He has passed the New York State bar exam and is biding his time for admission. Those of us who had to do that remember well that it does end, Brandon, sooner or later, and you'll be able to be a full-fledged one of us. Okay. In the meantime, you're overseeing the Ukrainian refugee program for the Church World Service. Church World Service is a faith-based organization, but it is non-sectarian in its approach to helping refugees, asylees, as are many faith-based programs run by organizations to fill the need to help people in situations such as this, because the federal government does not provide attorneys or assistance to people, and it's up to the private bar and the not-for-profit and faith-based organizations to fill the breach. So we can get started. I just want to say one word about CLE credits. This is a CLE program. At the end, everybody will get a certificate of attendance, which will appear on the events page. This program is accredited by the state of California. If your state accreditation agency has a reciprocity with California, you could submit it and get your CLE credit. So now I turn the program over to Brenton and Florence.
Thank you so much. We are very happy to be here today with all of you. It was really nice to be extended the opportunity to come speak about this. These are two of the largest humanitarian crises that have happened in the last year or so. So we are happy to share with you all a little bit more about it from the legal standpoint, and also giving you a sense of what you could possibly do to help if that was something you were interested in. So we just wanted to start first with a bit of an intro to CWS, which was already kind of done. But as was mentioned, CWS is a faith-based organization. And it doesn't just do resettlement services in the United States. It also offers a lot of services across the world. There are refugee camps in a number of different countries. It is also involved in rapid response to natural disasters and issues with hunger, poverty, etc. There's a lot of international and community development that it is involved in as well. And right now, it's one of the organizations at the forefront of handling a lot of the displacement that's happened in the last couple of years due to these crises. It was founded in 1946 in the wake of World War II. At that time, it was a Christian organization. 17 denominations came together to form the agency, and it was in response to the refugees who were the people who are now refugees after World War II. So now the overall vision is to just make sure everybody has a place they can call home, they're safe and have everything that they need. And one of those services in the United States, at least, is providing legal assistance to those who are resettled here. And our office is one of the ones with the legal departments. And Brandon will explain a little bit more about our office.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us. So a little bit about the Jersey City office, where both me and Florence are located. Starting in 2015, CWS Jersey City, we've become a center for the resettlement of refugees in diverse and vibrant communities across northern New Jersey. We cover various counties in northern New Jersey. And we provide both legal as well as social services for newly arrived refugees. And through its refugee resettlement program, CWS Jersey City, we provide comprehensive case management as well as employment services. And that they're really aimed at empowering newly arrived refugees to build a foundation for long-term self-sufficiency and success here in the United States. So some of these services include intensive case management, cultural orientations, health access assistance, assistance with social security numbers and work authorizations, as well as intensive job preparation and placement and English language classes. CWS Jersey City, we're also really proud to serve the community at large by providing citizenship education, immigration legal services, and community education and engagement opportunities throughout the year. So we really try to work outside of the four walls of our office and work within our community so that we can provide a holistic approach, both on the legal side as well as the social services side.
Okay, so I'll talk for a bit about the Afghan crisis and what led to the influx of over 80,000 Afghan refugees into the United States. As many of you know, there was a war in Afghanistan for basically 2 decades. And in the last year or so, the United States made it very clear that it was going to be beginning the withdrawal process of its troops who were there. The troops were not necessarily fighting anymore. I mean, some were still fighting, but they were doing a lot in keeping things, quote unquote, stabilized in Afghanistan. So once they left, the last few people left, not many days later, there was an invasion of the Taliban basically into Kabul, which is the capital city of Afghanistan. And many of my clients have said to me that once the Taliban came into Kabul, they knew that they needed to leave immediately, because since they had a connection to the United States, the Taliban was going to come for them. The Taliban has a pretty intense network, I guess I would say. And even if the Taliban know who you are in northern Afghanistan, they have people everywhere. And so when they came to Kabul, they could still find you and your family members. So once that all happened, the United States was a bit shocked, surprisingly, and arranged for an evacuation out of Afghanistan that would involve bringing those who were allies to the US military and or government and their family members to the United States. Some of you may have seen pictures of planes leaving from the airport in Kabul with people hanging on to the wings and just trying to grab on so that they could leave. That's because the evacuation process was very chaotic for many of them. Several got split up from their family members and came here by themselves, while their spouse and their children are still in Afghanistan, along with most of their family. So, let me see here. So they were brought to the United States. They were given humanitarian parole through a program called Operation Allies Welcome. The goal of this program was to make sure they had status here and that they would be able to build and start a new life here. That being said, parole does not lead to any pathway to permanent status here in the United States. Parole, humanitarian parole, is very temporary. It was provided to Afghans for 2 years, and most of them will have their parole expire starting this August. And once it expires, they are then in the United States without status. So a lot of the work we're doing in terms of legal assistance is, one, making sure people get the benefits that the immigration benefits that they deserve, but also making sure they will not be in a situation where they have a lapse in status or something recognized by United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. And right now they all have work authorization. And so one of our goals is to make sure that nobody has a gap in work authorization as well. Most people did come through the airports and they flew here via a number of other countries. It was a long journey to get here. But like I said, some families were split up and not everybody was able to make it through into the airport. And there are some people who arrived at the border, the US-Mexico border. which I'm sure that was, even more of an intense journey, just getting from all the way in Afghanistan to Mexico. Yeah, I already said this about the parole expiring. They've been here since starting around the end of August 2021. There are actually still Afghans arriving in the United States, and the number is well over 80,000 as of right now. And there are still several who are in Afghanistan who are trying to reunite with their family members here. And that is another part of the process, in addition to just regular immigration legal services.
Okay, so now I'll give you a little bit of a background on, how all of this happened with Ukraine. So starting in late February, the Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia would be conducting a, quote, special military operation in Ukraine. And the following day, Russian troops were seen crossing over into Ukrainian territory. This current conflict, it's not new, although it's new like in the news and in our social awareness. It's really up at the front. But this war has actually been going on since 2014 and really even a little bit before that. And that can be seen through the Russian annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, Ukrainian territory that Russia sees as theirs. And Putin argues that, because Russians and Ukrainians, they can trace their origins back to the same medieval Kievan Rus Commonwealth. Putin believes that because of this, that their modern states should also share a political destiny. In speeches given by Vladimir Putin, he often has a very similar theme that any Western allies or really anybody who talks about a Ukrainian national identity is really attacking Russia, because according to Putin, there is no such thing as a Ukrainian national identity. Instead, that is just, an off branch of the Russian identity. This is a little bit of the background. And Florence, I think you can move on to the next slide. As of the fall of 2022, there have been more than 7 million people that refugees who have left Ukraine. And the first countries that they fled to were neighboring Eastern European countries. Poland has been one of the largest countries to accept Ukrainian refugees. Slowly towards the beginning of the war, February, March, we saw that a lot of people were trying to leave any way that they could. And so one of the easiest ways to leave the country and come to the United States is by getting a B1, B2 tourist visa. This visa is very common and quite easy to receive. However, it does not lead to any permanent pathway. As the name suggests, it's a tourist visa. It's very temporary. It only allows an individual to remain in the US for 90 days. And they are allowed to extend that for an additional 90 days. However, we've been seeing that that those extensions have not really been getting approved very often. The one thing that the United States has done was creating the Uniting for Ukraine program. So this Uniting for Ukraine program, it allows a pathway for people to leave Ukraine, enter the United States, and get that same type of status as Afghans, which is a humanitarian parole. The Ukrainian humanitarian parole is also for a 2-year period. Additionally, it does not lead to a pathway to citizenship. The one real benefit of humanitarian parole is that it allows for work authorization. That has been a large part of my practice right now, has been going through this backlog of clients to get everybody work authorization. And with work authorization, Social Security numbers, which allows them to get Medicaid and other social services that they're eligible for. The other program that is open to Ukrainians is the Lautenberg program. And the Lautenberg program has actually been around for a very long time. I believe it has its origins right after World War II as well. And so this is a family reunification program that allows certain individuals who are legally residing already in the United States to bring over their family members through the US Refugee Admissions Program. And now this Lautenberg program is really for religious minorities that have been persecuted. So here, as you see on the screen, this program is open to evangelical Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, Ukraine Greek Catholics, as well as Ukrainian Orthodox Church members. So really, those are our three ways that we've seen Ukrainians getting into the country, either tourist visas, Uniting for Ukraine, or the Lautenberg program. And now once they are in the United States, what do these different statuses allow them to have? So humanitarian parole, like we've said before, it's a temporary status to live for a specific amount of time in the United States. That is usually 2 years. I have been seeing that some Ukrainians who have come through the US-Mexico border have been getting humanitarian parole as well, but only for 1 year instead of 2 years. Humanitarian parole also provides eligibility for work authorization, and it allows them to gain public benefits. These public benefits can include refugee cash assistance, housing assistance, food stamps, Medicaid, and various other benefits that are offered by the ORR, Office of Refugee Resettlement. And finally, the other thing that humanitarian parole provides, which is amazing, is a protection from deportation for that 2-year period that people are here. The next status that we've seen clients have is TPS, or temporary protected status. And as the name suggests, this is also a very temporary status. For Ukrainians, TPS has been granted through until October 19th of next year, 2023. However, we've seen that a lot of clients, especially now, no longer qualify for TPS. And that is because in order to qualify for TPS, these Ukrainian clients have to have continuous residence in the US since April 11th of 2022, continuous physical presence, so they haven't left since April 19th of 2022. And really that was, in my opinion, a little too soon because the vast majority of Ukrainians were not in the United States by that early April date. We've seen really an influx of clients who just have arrived after that date, and TPS is just not available to them. And finally, the B1, B2 tourist visa. As I said before, it's just a 90-day visa to enter the US, and it can be extended for another 90 days. But these individuals are not eligible to work, and they're not eligible for any public benefits at all. So, it's an easy way to get into the country. However, once you get here, it's a pretty rough status to live under because you don't really have anything that's afforded to you.
Okay, so on the other hand, Afghans have some options to permanent residency. One option is asylum. This is not to say that Ukrainians can't apply for asylum. It's just that a lot of them, like Brandon said, saw the war was happening and were like, I just need to go. And it's not necessarily that something was happening to them directly, but there are, of course, people who have claims of past persecution, and arguably pretty much everybody has well-founded fear. This war has been going on for quite some time now, and as far as I know, there's no signs that it'll be ending anytime soon. But with Afghans, there are a few things that make their asylum process different from the standard asylum process. So it's the same in the sense that everybody has 1 year to apply for asylum. And after that 1 year, you can still apply, but it makes it a little more complicated. And so with Afghans, there's an exception to the 1-year filing deadline that USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, has made clear essentially applies to Afghans in that they have parole until, August, September, October 2023. And with that, the 1-year clock does not start until their parole ends. The other thing is that Congress mandated that USCIS must schedule interviews within 45 days of the asylum filing and adjudicate within 150 days of the asylum filing. And so pretty much what this means is that for me, when I'm looking at all the Afghan clients that CWS has on the social services side, I am then having to go through and screen everybody to make sure that there is, a strong or just an asylum claim in general. And asylum is a humanitarian immigration benefit that, in brief, requires somebody to show that they have past persecution or well-founded fear of persecution based on being part of one of the 5 protected grounds, which are race, nationality, having a political opinion that is contrary to something in the country they're living in, religion, and membership in a particular social group. Membership in a particular social group is the category I'm using most often, just because a lot of the guys that I'm working with worked for the US military, and that doesn't really fall neatly into one of the 5 grounds. So I'm pretty much claiming that they're part of a social group that is very distinct. It's, really obvious that they are part of this group and that it's immutable. They can't do anything to change the fact that they are seen as part of that group. So that's just a little insight into what asylum is. And so after being granted asylum, they would have 2 years to apply for their spouse and their children to come into the United States, and then 1 year before green card authorization. And then after that, they have to wait more years for citizenship. So it's not really an expedited process, but you'll hear that it's expedited. It's really only expedited in the sense that the interviews are being scheduled very quickly, because USCIS pretty much operates under, first in, first out. Like if people apply more recently for asylum, they get scheduled quicker, but then somebody who applied for asylum in like 2014 is still waiting for an interview. So it was expedited in that sense, but what I'm seeing and what many others working with Afghans are seeing is that once that interview happens, it's radio silence. And that's been a struggle. Many people have seen it go outside the required 150 days, but there has not been that much of a push to address the backlog, because there's now an Afghan asylum backlog on top of the pre-existing asylum backlog. So the other benefit that is more specific is the special immigrant visa for Afghan nationals. This is for Afghan nationals who worked for or on behalf of the US military and or government after 2001 for 1 year. They're required to show that they gave faithful and valuable service to the United States. Usually this is through having an HR letter that verifies they worked for, the embassy or the US military, and then having a letter from a direct supervisor. But many of the clients, they do not have connections to the direct supervisors, and the letters they were given are being questioned by the State Department. And they're asking for more information, even though it was the US government that gave them the letter. So there's a lot of catch-22 type situations with these benefits. It's great that they exist, but there's also limitations within them that a lot of the clients are facing. But the difference between a special immigrant visa and asylum is that once they get the visa, they can immediately apply for a green card. And they can also include their spouse and their children under 21, which I forgot to mention that for asylum, they can be included as part of the application as well if they're here. the applying for spouse and children after 2 years is for those who are abroad. And Brandon will talk about the options that Ukrainians have to permanent residency.
Yeah, so Ukrainians really, there's only two major options for permanent residency in the United States. The first one is asylum, and the second being family-based green cards. So for asylum, Florence really just broke it down, but here it is on the slide about what you must show. And really, one thing that has been crucial is that a general fear of the war is not enough to win asylum. So, a lot of our clients are here and they say, well, I can't return back to Ukraine because I don't have a home anymore. My home was completely destroyed, after I left. Unfortunately, a general fear of the war without a specific threat to the individual, it really doesn't create a strong asylum case, and it's likely a case that will get denied. Unlike the Afghans, Ukrainians do have this 1-year filing deadline that applies immediately when they arrive. So it's 1 year after arrival, they have to apply for asylum. If not, as Florence said, it becomes a little bit more tricky. And there has been no special treatment for Ukrainian asylum applications. There's no expedited process. Essentially, Ukrainian asylee just gets onto the same line that an asylee from any other country is on. And what we've seen is that on average, it takes around 5 to 7 years to get an interview after applying. After filing for asylum. So, it's a bit crazy to think that, you could see a client today and file their application, and then, a couple of years will go by before you hear anything. But that's really the system that we're in right now. And so the other permanent pathway is family-based green cards. And so that is certain family members that are in the United States can petition for their relatives to receive green cards. However, it's very, very specific. So these refugees would need to have either a spouse, a parent, a sibling, or a child who is over the age of 21 and unmarried, who is either a US citizen or a green card holder themselves. And if these refugees can qualify for these small specific categories, then they can apply to get a family-based green card. However, there are different quote unquote lines that people would have to get on based on who their qualifying relative is. So if your qualifying relative is your child, you're a parent and you have a child who's a citizen, likely it'll be a little bit quicker. But if you find yourself in the situation where you're a refugee and the only family member that you have who is a citizen or green card holder is a sibling, a brother or a sister, well, unfortunately, the wait time is about 15 years for a family-based green card based on siblings. So, although this is a path to permanent residency, it's also, as Florence said, a catch-22 where it might not be a path to permanent residency, depending on which kind of family member you have in the United States.
Okay, so our last couple of slides are just touching on some of the trends that we're seeing and also some of the obstacles. For the sake of time, I'll just kind of combine, both of mine into the same thing. You may have heard that there was a lot of conversation when Ukrainians got the Uniting for Ukraine program that they were being treated differently. They were getting it, quicker than Afghans and things like that. That is true. But as you can see, there also is another side of things. Afghans are getting this expedited process for asylum. They're getting fee exemptions on but the most common immigration applications like the I-130, I-485, And Ukrainians are still kind of in this general process. So you might be like, wait, but what about what people are saying about Ukrainians getting treated differently? Well, this is the thing. So the Afghan situation, while it's a good benefit to have, it took a lot to get to the point of them getting the humanitarian parole and getting access to the public benefits, getting this expedited asylum process, et cetera, et cetera. So it took weeks, months, et cetera, for things to kind of get situated in that regard. But for Ukrainians, the war started, and then not even 2 weeks later, Uniting for Ukraine was announced. So that is really where the Ukrainians getting treated differently stems from. The other thing is that at the border, this is unrelated to Afghans, but just in general, at the border, from some of the connections and work that I do with Black migrants, there are like literally lines for Black migrants and then lines for Ukrainians to get in and like get processed and checked and whatever. And I just find that very interesting, because why are there two separate lines? Like, it doesn't get any more blatant than that in terms of disparities. So there's disparities throughout the immigration system as a whole, but I just wanted to touch on that. Just some people might be wondering, like, well, it seems like Afghans are getting treated better. So one of the things that I've been seeing is that some of the Afghans actually worked for the CIA. It wasn't just the US military, it was full-blown Central Intelligence Agency employment. And they also were not affiliated with the Afghan military in any sort of way. So they basically are being looked at as militias. And these CIA-backed groups are known as zero units. And these zero units are now being accused of committing human rights abuses in Afghanistan. So a lot of my guys that were part of these zero units are now facing an issue of being up against what's called the persecutor bar with the asylum process. And the persecutor bar essentially is that if you have persecuted somebody on one of the 5 protected grounds, you can't get asylum. And you might be wondering, what exactly do they persecute someone based on? Well, what we've been seeing from some of the notices of intent to deny that have been issued is that they are considering the Taliban to have a political opinion, a political identity. And these operations that these CIA-backed groups were engaging in were harmful. They were killing people, they were torturing people, etc. So that is something we're facing in real time. We still don't even really know how it's going to materialize, whether there are going to be official denials and things like that. So that's been interesting to see and a bit frustrating as well, because these guys were just working, they were just working, following orders, and, we're trying to help. And now they're facing a situation where that same help could be detrimental to one of their immigration options. I already touched a bit on family reunification. And another big issue that I'm seeing is that the laws here in Afghanistan regarding marriage are different. In Afghanistan, polygamy is legal. You can have multiple legal marriages at the same time. Here in the United States, you can only have one. And given how abrupt the move to the United States were, and a lot of them have only been here for like a year and a half, they still want to practice their culture, their beliefs, their ways of life, right? And one of the things that I have had to come up against is trying to break down how having multiple marriages at the same time is not really something accepted in the United States, and not even just like on an interpersonal level, like legally, it is not. And if you intend to practice polygamy while you're here in the United States, that can be a potential ground of inadmissibility, which essentially is just them saying like you can't get status here. So I'll let Brandon explain some of the trends he's been seeing.
Yeah, so one of the major things that we've been seeing is that the majority of my clients have been women, specifically women with their children, as well as people over the age of 60. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for this. One, in Ukraine, it's a little tough for fighting aged men to leave the country because there's martial law going on. And there's also a bit of I don't want to say old school mentality, but a little bit of the word is escaping me. Essentially, the vulnerable populations of people have been leaving first. And what we've seen is that a lot of our clients are elderly and are looking for Medicaid as well as any other kind of healthcare benefit. And so one thing that we've really been seeing is that our clients have been having issues getting social security numbers. And so the way that the process works is that the Social Security Administration has been denying our clients social security numbers if they have not already applied for work authorization. And a lot of our clients have been trying to do this on their own and apply for social security numbers, but getting denied. And they come to me and they say, my mother is here, she's 75 years old, she has no intent to work, she's disabled, we just need healthcare. Why can't I just get a social security number? And I have to explain that, unfortunately, although they're legally allowed to get one, the Social Security Administration has been fighting us a lot and has not been providing those. And so people are having to wait the 6 to 9 months on average that it takes to get work authorization before they can get social security numbers, which really they only need for healthcare and other public benefits reasons. Another trend that I've been seeing is that if people are not coming in through tourist visas or the Uniting for Ukraine program, there has been an increased number of people who have been flying to the US-Mexico border. And there has been large groups of Ukrainians that have been crossing together. They've been crossing the southern border and essentially surrendering themselves to CBP in the hopes to be released into the US with some kind of status. And so what I've been seeing is that a lot of clients will have, this is where I mentioned before, some clients have parole, but only for 1 year. This is where a lot of those clients fall. As well as they're having other stipulations placed onto them, like ICE check-ins, supervision check-ins, as well as just straight up notice to appear and notice to appear court dates. So that has been something that we've been really having an increase of, and that we're trying to stay on top of. And one of the major obstacles that Ukrainians face, and I hope that I've expressed throughout this presentation, is that they don't really have many options for permanent status in the US. A lot of people want to return back to Ukraine, but they want the war to be over. Right now, the war, there's no end in sight. My clients are telling me that they're hearing from back home that they don't think that the war is 6 months, a year could still be, realistic. So, they want to remain here for as long as they can, but there's just there's no pathways. And unlike the Afghan situation, Congress has really failed to act. Congress has not passed anything close to an Afghan Adjustment Act. They haven't really even, I haven't heard news about it, to be honest. They seem to just be okay with this Uniting for Ukraine program. And it seems like the US government's position is hopefully the war will end soon. And, that's it, essentially. They're not really making any further headway to secure permanent status here in the US.
So the last thing I'll say before we wrap it up is just to clarify, the Afghan Adjustment Act hasn't been passed, but it's been presented. Like, it's been presented and they're debating it. Really, they're stalling on it. This is something that should have been passed, last year. And it really just got, I think it was put before the House, like a few months ago, like to actually be debated. So there's a lot of advocacy happening right now around that, because if it were passed, it would be similar to the Cuban Adjustment Act, which allows people to apply for green cards without having to, apply for asylum first, a family-based petition first, et cetera, et cetera. But, there would be specific requirements. There's a lot of language in it, but overall it would be helpful. And it would also reduce the burden on legal service providers to have to help, all these thousands of people figure out how they're going to get, asylum or special immigrant visa, or maybe they have a family member, an immediate relative who can petition for them. But I'm not even really seeing that. Like, I think I've heard of one instance where somebody already has had family petition for them in terms of Afghans. But the last little bit was just going to be us going over kind of what could be in, we wanted to make a note on busing of migrants to the US, but for sake of time, we'll skip over this, but it's included in the slides that should be provided to you all. We were going to touch on, being a pro bono volunteer attorney. If anybody has questions about it, please ask for the question portion, but we're happy to share more information with the team so that they can pass it along to you. And we are taking, volunteers, but of course, more information would be needed, but we are going to be hosting an info session in January. The date, time are still being worked out. If anybody has particular interest in that, we can make sure we get that information to you. And thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully we didn't go too over on time.
No, we're doing well. We
Awesome.
have time left over for questions. If anyone has a question, you can write it in the chat. In the meantime, I had a couple of thoughts I can turn into questions. First, let me say, anyone who is interested in volunteering to help, just you could contact Florence and Brandon. I suggest that you both put your emails up on chat, and you could steer people in the right direction. Okay, now one question I had was for Afghans, there's supposed to be an interview within 150 days. Is that enough time to prepare a case, get evidence together, do you feel?
Yeah, well, for me, I don't submit until I know it's ready, because they really do schedule it within 45 days and way before that too. Like, I have one client, I sent it out, and then like a couple of weeks later, we got her interview notice, and the interview was going to be in like a week. So thankfully, everything I wanted was submitted. And then if there was extra stuff, I brought it to the interview or emailed it to the asylum office ahead of time. But no, it's not enough time. So I think other people are probably using the same kind of approach, because it will get scheduled like within weeks.
So if a case is, I don't know if you've had any decisions yet from the asylum office, but have you had any referrals to the immigration court?
Not yet, but unfortunately they are coming, and I'm trying to prepare myself for when that occurs. I haven't had any decisions on my cases, but there have been a lot of noise being sent out, but the saving grace right now is that they're still in status. But once these decisions are made and there are denials issued, in the fall of 2023, most of these folks will be out of status and they'll be referred to immigration court. So it's kind of nerve-wracking to think about, but it is very likely, especially with the 0 unit military guys that I was talking about, just because they're really up against this persecuted bar, which is kind of unfortunate.
Right. Now, you touched upon the delays in adjudication, which goes to the broader picture of the dysfunction of the whole immigration system, which unfortunately is exacerbated by the mass of Afghan and Ukrainian cases that have hit the system. So for non-practitioners, you should be aware that immigration is a very dysfunctional system, and to get something done in a year is like getting something done in 10 minutes.
Yeah. And honestly, the 45-day thing, I didn't believe it when I was first told, but when I got that interview notice, I was like, okay, I guess it is real. But yeah, they're taking a lot of time with adjudicating, which isn't surprising. And the other piece of it is they are, at least in the interviews I've done, they're focusing on things that, in my opinion, are not very relevant to the case. And then asking for more evidence based on it. So pretty much everybody is getting requests for more evidence if they're not getting annoyed. Notice of intent to deny.
Okay, so Cody Chappelle, who's also vice president of the at-large chapter, wants to know, what can a non-immigration attorney do to help? What type of work is needed by volunteer attorneys?
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit about this. So we are always looking for people who speak either Dari or Pashto, which is the Afghan languages, or Ukrainian and Russian, because translation services are something that we definitely need. As well as we host a lot of clinics. So I know that Florence in the past has done SIV, that special immigrant visa for Afghans, clinics. There are EAD and TPS, EAD employment authorization document, and TPS temporary protected status clinics that we plan to run in the future. And these these forms can really be filled out by any attorney or even law student. You don't have to be an immigration expert in order to figure out the TPS form or the work authorization document. So we're always looking for more attorneys to work with us for our clinics, as well as, like I said, translation services. And then, I think also one thing that can be provided is, there are attorneys that do all different types of things, and people need attorneys for everything. I'm thinking off the top of my head, a client who has come to me and said, hey, I need help reviewing a lease. As an attorney, I can look at a lease and I can give some knowledge about it, but really, if there was a real estate attorney who could look at the lease, that would be a lot better. So, providing whatever kind of expertise you have to help immigrants, I think is definitely valuable and would be welcomed. Because, our clients, they need more than just help getting their legal status set. They need help establishing themselves in the United States, so that they can fully succeed and thrive, in whatever they do.
Okay, so if anybody is interested, they should just shoot you folks an email, and you'll follow up and make sure that either they work with you or another volunteer organization, and they'll have enough mentorship so that nobody is left out to dry. Okay.
Absolutely.
I had one other observation, which nobody talked about, getting sponsored through an employment visa. But people who are here from Ukraine or even Afghanistan may have job skills. They may be professionals or have a lot of experience doing something. especially if they're here and they have parole, they may very well be able to be sponsored for a green card if an employer is willing to sponsor them, and there's a match between the skills and experience that someone has and the need of an employer. I know that's really, as an immigration attorney, we're not employment agencies, but I always tell people, look, see if you can find somebody even in your own community who's a businessman who might have the kind of company that could hire you and would consider hiring you because that person might be an immigrant as well and be more favorably disposed. So I just put it out there. That's another possible way of proceeding.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll speak for myself working with Afghans. That is really not the most viable option at the moment. A lot of them are having trouble finding employment as it is. And a lot of them have a language barrier, like a significant language barrier. And then on top of that, they're pre-literate, so they can't even read or write in their language. And not to say that they don't have skills people are looking for, they do. It's just that a lot of the jobs that they did in Afghanistan weren't necessarily something that they could replicate here. Like, it was so specific and niche to helping the US military for most of them. And even those that did have, like government jobs, things like that, they're having a hard time just in general. Like one of the clients who participated in our pro se asylum clinic, she was the deputy minister of education for Afghanistan, and she was not able to get a job with her year in New Jersey, and she moved. I hope she has a job now, but yeah, so that's definitely, a viable route, but it's just something that seems difficult. Most of them, when they are getting jobs, it's like Uber, Lyft, working at grocery stores and things like that. So it's not so much a situation, at least that I have noticed, of employers that would be welcoming to sponsoring. But yeah, that's just my kind of perspective / opinion.
And I can add a little bit, not necessarily about employment visas, but employment. So as of November 21st of 2022, just a couple of weeks ago, USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, changed their rule when it comes to Ukrainian parolees as well as Afghan parolees. But they created it so that they created this rule that said that now Ukrainian parolees are work authorized incident to status, which means that their status as parolees gives them the ability to work prior to getting their work permits, and it allows them to work for 90 days, and it allows the employer to do the I-9 process with just the I-94 admissions document. But what we have been seeing is that a lot of clients have been coming to us and saying, I understand that I'm allowed to work and that I don't need to wait for my work permit, but the employer won't hire me. They keep telling me that I need my work permit, I need a social security card, I need all these documents. When legally they don't. All they need is their I-94. But what we've seen is that employers are not respecting this new rule and just deciding not to hire people until they get their work permits, which, as I said before, could take 6 to 9 months to receive.
Okay, well, we hit the wall at 5 o'clock. I want to thank both the participants and the speakers for this wonderful program. In terms of CLE credits, if you scroll to the beginning of the chat, you'll see an email that you can site you can go to follow up on your
So
credits.
yeah, sorry, I know we're at time, but there was a question about working on lawsuits in United States from Ukrainian victims. I'm guessing victims of the war. Brandon, I don't know if you know what that might be referring to. No, okay. And then same person said, many Ukrainians are highly educated people who have business in Ukraine. So it is important to know more about taxes and small business and work with NGOs with charity work and advocacy for bills about Ukraine. Yeah, definitely. And like one thing CWS does is assist clients with filing taxes. There was actually a tax event a few weeks ago for Afghans, and I'm sure they'll do the same for Ukrainians, but we have employment specialists and caseworkers who work with people on that employment side of things specifically. But if you have more you wanted to share or ask with regards to that, definitely contact us and let us know.
Well, I guess that's it, folks. So thank you all again, and let's all keep up the good work.
Yes, thank you so much for having us, and it was nice to be here with you all.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.